Howdy y'all, Buck Tanner here, and today we're diving into the rarest, quirkiest guns you've never heard of. Forget your everyday Glocks and AR-15s, these are the black sheep of the firearm family. The ones that'll have you scratching your head and saying, what in tarnation were they thinking? From oddballs to outright bizarre creations, we're talking guns so strange they make your weird uncle's potato cannon look tame. So grab a snack and hang on tight. This is gonna be one wild ride through history's wackiest firearms. Alright folks, strap in, cause we're about to take a wild ride through the world of the Type 100 SMG. A gun that wasn't just late to the World War II party, but showed up with quirks so unique you'll either scratch your head or tip your hat in respect. First, let's set the stage. It's the middle of World War II when every major player's bringing their A-game to the submachine gun lineup. Tommy guns, Stens, sleek, deadly, and ready for action. Meanwhile, Japan? They're still clinging to their oversized rifles like a dog with his favorite chew toy. But then, in a moment of better late than never, they step into the SMG arena with the Type 100. Now here's a curveball. The Type 100 wasn't sleek, it wasn't powerful, and it definitely wasn't winning any beauty contests. Imagine showing up to a NASCAR race in a vintage tractor. It's clunky, it's weird, but it's got just enough heart to keep you watching. That's the energy this gun brought to the battlefield. And let's talk quirks, because oh boy, it had them. The safety mechanism? Think of it like a temperamental door lock. It worked, but only if you begged it nicely. And the sights? About as precise as trying to hit a bullseye after spinning around in circles. Yet, somehow this gun managed to get the job done most of the time. But wait, here's the kicker, the bipod. A bipod on a sub-machine gun. It's like putting training wheels on a Harley Davidson. Was it necessary? Probably not, but was it hilarious? Absolutely. In the chaos of battle, it gave the Type 100 its own weird little edge. Now here's where we hit the peak. The Type 100 wasn't a top-tier weapon, it wasn't a game changer, but it was a fighter. It showed up, flaws and all, and said, you know what, let's give this a shot. In a world of perfect polished weapons, there's something undeniably charming about an underdog that scrapes by on guts and gumption. So as we coast to the finish line, let's tip our hats to the Type 100 SMG. Not just a gun, but a reminder that even the quirkiest, most imperfect tools can leave a mark in history. And for that, it's earned a rightful spot in the story of World War II. Okay folks, buckle up, because the next on our list is the UD-M42, a gun that rolled onto the scene like a new kid at school, dressed to impress and ready to shake things up. Now let me tell you, this was not your grandpappy's machine gun. No. This slick little number came in looking all modern and sophisticated, promising to rewrite the rules of war. See, back then, the M1 Thompson was like a high-maintenance prom queen. Sure, it was a looker, but it was pricey, picky, and needed more TLC than a rusty tractor. Enter the UD-M42, the scrappy workhorse that said, I got you covered. Chambered in the good old 9mm Parabellum, it had ammo you could scoop off the battlefield like it was candy after a parade. Sounds like a dream, right? Well, here's the twist. On paper, the M42 was a rock star. High rate of fire? Check. Double mag setup? Fancy. But in the real world, let's just say it wasn't exactly the MVP. It jammed more than a middle school garage band. It weighed about as much as your mother-in-law's casserole dish, and cleaning it? Oh boy, was that a chore. But hold up, it wasn't all bad news. The M42 still got some love from resistance fighters and special forces. It was tough, reliable when it needed to be, and let's face it, it looked cool enough to earn a spot on the cover of a pulp action novel. So, was the UD-M42 the game changer everyone wanted? Nah, not quite, but it's a solid reminder that even the best ideas can fizzle out. And hey, isn't that what makes gun history so dang fun? Sometimes it's the failures that tell the best stories. Okay, y'all, number 3 on today's list is the one and only FG-42. Now, let's get one thing straight. The Germans weren't messing around with this one. They wanted a gun that could do everything. Hit long shots, fire faster than a gossip train in a small town, and look cool enough to belong in a James Bond flick. And let me tell you, they delivered. Well, sorta. This bad boy was like the overachiever in high school. It looked great on paper, had all the potential in the world, but came with more baggage than a reality show contestant. The FG-42 was a total nightmare to make. Complex, expensive, and required so much skilled labor, it probably had a higher GPA than I ever did. It's like they said, why build a simple gun when we can build a mechanical Rubik's Cube that shoots bullets? Now don't get me wrong, when it worked, this thing was a beast. Powerful? Check. Accurate? Double check. Reliable? Sure. Until it decided it wasn't, but oh man, the downsides. This thing was so heavy you'd need a chiropractor after lugging it around. Man, it was bulky. Let's just say hiding this thing in the trenches wasn't exactly an option. Oh, and finicky. You'd have better luck convincing a cat to take a bath than getting this thing to behave all the time. But hey, credit where credit's due. The FG-42 looked so cool it could make your Glock jealous. And while it wasn't winning any Mass Production of the Year awards, it did have its niche. Special Forces and paratroopers loved it for specific jobs where it shined brighter than a freshly polished chrome bumper. So, was the FG-42 a game changer? Nah, not really, but it's the kind of gun that makes you stop and say, dang, they really swung for the fences, didn't they? And for that, it earned its spot as one of history's most ambitious, over-engineered marvels. Hats off to the FG-42, folks. It's proof that sometimes even the quirkiest ideas can leave a lasting legacy. Well, hot dang, let me introduce you to the Mauser 38, the French submachine gun that showed up late but made an entrance like a fashionably late party guest, dressed to the nines and stealing the show. This thing wasn't just a gun, it was a finely tuned French flex. Sleek? Check. Deadly? You bet. And faster than a Paris cafe can whip up your morning espresso. That's a Mauser 38 for you. Now let's be real, it wasn't exactly punctual. The Mauser 38 rolled into the SMG scene after everyone else was already knee-deep in the action. But when it did show up, it brought some serious swagger. It was tough as nails, built like a tank, and somehow still had that French elegance, like a bulldozer in a tuxedo. Leave it to the French to make even a battlefield tool look like it belongs in an art museum. But hold your horses, it wasn't perfect. The Mauser 38 had a little quirk, the 7.65 long cartridge. You know what that meant? French soldiers couldn't just borrow ammo from their enemies. Nope, they had to bring their own, which probably led to some very colorful battlefield commentary. Let's just say Sacre Bleu wasn't the only thing they were yelling out there. Now here's the juicy part. The Mauser 38 didn't just sit in the corner looking pretty, it got itself into history books. How, you may ask? By helping take out Benito Mussolini himself. That's right, this French beauty played a starring role in the downfall of one of the nastiest dictators of the 20th century. You can't make this stuff up, folks. So while the Mauser 38 didn't win any popularity contests or get mass-produced like the M1 Garand, it did leave its mark. It was unique, stylish, and had one heck of a claim to fame. And isn't that what makes these underdog stories so dang fun? Hats off to the Mauser 38. It might not have been perfect, but it sure knew how to make history look good. Now let me tell y'all about the Lisle Carbine, the James Bond of rifles. This thing was stealthy enough to sneak past your grandma's nosy neighbor, and quiet enough to make a librarian proud. Seriously, it could fire around so silent you'd think it was apologizing for even being there. The Lisle is what I like to call a Franken-gun special. They cobbled this thing together like it was a last-minute science fair project. Start with a chopped-up Lee Enfield rifle stock, slap on a Thompson submachine gun barrel, and toss in a Colt 1911 magazine for good measure. But the piece de resistance, that massive suppressor. The suppressor was so big it looked like someone duct-taped a Pringles can to the barrel. And don't even ask about the weight. Carrying it was like hauling a steel beam on your back. But let's talk about why this gun was the quiet kid in class. The British designed it for one reason: stealth. If you needed to take out a sentry without waking up the rest of the enemy camp, the Lisle was your best friend. It was so good at keeping secrets, I'm pretty sure it's the reason M16 had to up their game. Of course, no gun's perfect, and the Lisle had its quirks. It was heavy, bulky, and as awkward to handle as you were as a teenager on your first date. And let's not forget about the price tag. It was so expensive they only made a handful of them. But hey, when you're knocking out enemies like a ninja with a muffler, I'd say it's worth it. Oh, and here's a real mic drop. This bad boy is the granddaddy of all those silent assassins you see in the spy movies. Yep, the next time you're watching a hero take down baddies with a whisper quiet shot, you could thank the Lisle Carbine for inspiring it. Quiet, deadly, and cooler than a popsicle in a snowstorm. What's not to love? Alright folks, let's talk about the Kolibri, the world's smallest pistol. When I say small, I mean this thing's so tiny you could probably lose it in your sock drawer, or even mistake it for one of those little Monopoly pieces. I mean seriously, if pocket pistols were a family, this one's the baby that everyone forgets about at the picnic. The Kolibri was designed back in the day as a self-defense weapon for women. The idea was simple: a gun so small and discreet you could toss it in your purse and go about your day. Sounds pretty handy, right? Well, there's just one tiny little hiccup. It fires a bullet so weak, you'd probably have better luck throwing a tic-tac at your attacker. Heck, the Kolibri's firepower is about as intimidating as a toddler with a water balloon. Now, let's talk practicality, or the lack thereof. Reloading this thing was a game of operation. You were more likely to pinch your fingers than hit anything at all. In fact, if the bad guy gave you a dirty look, the Kolibri might just pack up and quit on the spot. I mean, come on. If you're relying on this thing for self-defense, you might as well carry a pointy stick and yell really loud. Here's the kicker, though. People actually thought this was a good idea. Like, who looked at this and said, yeah, that'll do the trick? If you ask me, a can of pepper spray, a baseball bat, or even a really aggressive house cat would have been better choices. And man, don't even get me started on just taking a self-defense class. That's gotta be safer than trying to wield a pistol that's smaller than a pack of gum. So while the Kolibri is a cute little novelty piece, it's less weapon and more conversation starter. But hey, it's got its place in history, for better or worse. And if you're looking to start a bar fight in a dollhouse, well, this might just be the gun for you. Alright folks, buckle up, because we're diving into the weird and desperate world of the MP-3008, the German Hail Mary of submachine guns. Now, when you think of German engineering, you might picture finely tuned machines, right? Well, not this time. The MP-3008 wasn't exactly an Autobahn-ready BMW. It was more like that rusty old bicycle held together with duct tape and prayer. See, by the end of the war, Germany was in rough shape. Resources were gone, morale was in the gutter, and their army was barely hanging on. So, what'd they do? They took a look at the British Sten, slapped together a copy, and called it the MP-3008. Honestly, it's like copying your buddy's homework, but just changing it just enough not to get caught. And let me tell you, the MP-3008 was not winning any beauty contests. It was designed to arm the Volkssturm, Germany's home guard, a ragtag group made up of old men, young boys, and anyone else who could hold a gun. Simple, cheap, and reliable. Well, sure, but a precision instrument? Not so much. This thing was basically a lead-spitting pipe with dreams. The sights were worthless, the accuracy was questionable at best, and the recoil? Well, let's just say it gave you a workout whether you wanted one or not. But hey, desperate times call for desperate measures, right? When you're down to your last nickel and fighting for survival, you don't get to be picky. The MP-3008 was not about style or finesse, it was about slapping something together and giving the German people a fighting chance. And in that sense, it did its job. So while the MP-3008 isn't going to end up in a museum of finely crafted weapons, it's got its place in history. A reminder that sometimes even the scrappiest tools can make a difference when the chips are down. And that's definitely something worth remembering, don't you think? Alright folks, let's talk about the, and excuse me, my German is very rusty, Volkssturmgewehr. The German Wehr out of options rifle. This was not your typical over-engineered German masterpiece. No way, this was more like the DIY project of a nation running on fumes. And let me tell you, it was about as no frills as they come. By the time this rifle rolled out, Germany was in a bind. Their resources were gone, and their army was falling apart faster than a kid's school science project. So they needed something simple, something cheap, and something they could crank out faster than Grandma baking cookies at Christmas. Enter the Volkssturmgewehr. A rifle so stripped down it looks like it came free with a box of cereal. Now let's break this down. This baby had a delayed blowback action so simple you could explain it to your dog. The sights were basic, and the finish was cruder than your Uncle Larry after a couple of beers. But you know what? It worked. It was cheap, functional, and exactly what the German Home Guard, aka the Volkssturm, a group made with more guts than gear, needed to make with one last stand. Was it a precision instrument? Heck no. This thing was not about finesse. It was a glorified, blunt object that happened to fire bullets. But here's the thing. In the chaos of war's final days, good enough was exactly that. You didn't need it to win any shooting competitions, you just needed it to give you a fighting chance. The Volkssturmgewehr wasn't elegant, it wasn't sophisticated, but it was a symbol of desperation and ingenuity. The kind of weapon that says, we're not going down without a fight. And in a way, you gotta admire that. It's a reminder that even when the odds are stacked against you, sometimes you just gotta grab whatever you can and keep on swinging. Okay, folks, gather around for one of the wildest weapons the Germans cooked up, the Einstossflammenwerfer 46. This wasn't your standard issue flamethrower, oh no. This was a one and done, pray it works kind of deal. Imagine a firecracker with delusions of grandeur, and you've got yourself the Einstossflammenwerfer. Want to know how it worked? Well, you lit it, pointed it at the enemy, and you hope for the best. Simple, right? It's like they said, why make a sophisticated flamethrower when we can just hand people a glorified Molotov cocktail with a handle? Honestly, it's less engineering marvel and more campfire gone rogue. Now, the backstory here is key. Germany was in a bad way during the final days of war. Starting to sound familiar, right? Supplies were running out and desperation was running high. So they handed these flamethrowers to the Volkssturm, that scrappy group of civilians we mentioned about before. Now remember, they were about as well trained as a cat trying to use a treadmill. So, kind of like tossing a kid a bottle rocket and saying, good luck out there, champ. But let's talk about effectiveness. Sure, the Einstossflammenwerfer could unleash a fiery hellstorm once. But after that, it was as useful as a soggy matchstick. If you missed your target, well, let's just say you better have a good exit strategy. But for what it was, a cheap, simple weapon made for desperate times, it did its job. The Einstossflammenwerfer 46 was not elegant, it was not sophisticated, and it definitely wasn't safe. But it was a symbol of Germany's last-ditch efforts to hold the line. It's proof that when the chips are down, people get real creative, even if that creativity looks like chaos with a side of kindling. Alright, history buffs, gather around, because today we're shining a light on the underappreciated workhorse of World War II, the Arisaka Type 99 rifle. Now, this Japanese bolt-action rifle didn't just serve, it showed up, clocked in, and did the job, even if it doesn't get the love it deserves. It's the underdog of wartime weapons, and I'm here to give it the respect that it earned. So why does the Type 99 have such a meh reputation stateside? I think I used that right. Well, for starters, anything made in Japan wasn't exactly flying off the shelves after the war. Plus, Uncle Sam was not shy about flexing American firepower and pushing weapons like the M1 Garand, a semi-automatic that made the bolt-action Type 99 look like the slowpoke of the bunch. And let's face it, when your competitor is the M1 Garand, you're always going to feel like the second fiddle. But here's the thing, the Type 99 was no slouch. In the early days of the Pacific War, this rifle was the backbone of Japanese infantry victories. The US military even tipped their hats to its toughness in field manuals, though they still threw shade by calling Japanese soldiers poor marksmen. Talk about a backhanded compliment. Now, like most things during wartime, the Type 99 had its ups and downs. Early models were rock solid, built with precision and care. But as Japan's resources dwindled, the last-ditch versions started rolling out. Now let's just say they cut more corners than a kid trying to finish a book report the night before it's due. These stripped-down models gave the Type 99 a bit of a rough rep. But you know what? Despite all that, the Arisaka Type 99 deserves a little more respect. Sure, it's not as flashy or beloved as its American counterparts, but it's a tough, reliable, and historically significant piece of hardware. And for collectors, it's an affordable slice of history that tells a story you won't get from an M1 Garand. So, here's to the Type 99, the underdog that proved you don't need to be the most popular rifle in the room to make a mark on history. Alright folks, let's talk about one of the wildest pieces of German engineering from World War II, the Mauser MG 213. This was not your everyday machine gun. Oh no, this was the kind of weapon that made you sit back and think, what in the world were they cooking up over there? Spoiler alert, it was not bratwurst. The Mauser MG 213 was a gas-operated revolver-style autocannon, designed to pump out rounds faster than a line of impatient kids at an ice cream truck. Built in the dying days of the war, this experimental beast never really saw combat, but its legacy? Oh, it lived on in ways nobody could have predicted. Let's break it down. This thing was a 20mm autocannon, capable of spitting out rounds with an insane rate of fire. It used a revolving cylinder mechanism like an oversized angry revolver to load its ammo. Efficient? Absolutely. Terrifying? You bet. It was built for aircraft, which meant its job was not just to shoot, it was to turn the sky into a no-fly zone for anything with wings. Here's the kicker though. While the war ended before the MG 213 could take to the skies, its design sparked a revolution. Engineers across the world took one look at this bad boy and said, now that's an idea. It directly inspired post-war aircraft cannons like the Pontiac M39, the Aden cannon, and the DEFA 30mm. In other words, the MG 213 may have been ahead of its time, but it paved the way for modern aerial firepower. But, let's not gloss over its quirks. Being on experimental design, it was temperamental. It was expensive, and it was about as reliable as a weather forecast during monsoon season. But for a weapon that was essentially a prototype, it was an impressive leap forward. So while the Mauser MG 213 never fired a shot in anger, its impact on military aviation was massive. It's a testament to how desperation and ingenuity can create something that outlasts its time, even in the chaos of war. And that, my friends, is why this quirky, over-engineered cannon deserves its place in the history books. The Insas, short for Indian Small Arms System, was India's ambitious attempt at creating a homegrown military rifle. Designed in the 1980s, it was chambered with 5.56 by 45mm NATO rounds, with semi-automatic and burst fire modes to keep pace with modern weaponry. On paper, it looked like a solid contender for the Indian Armed Forces. In practice, though, well, let's just say it had its quirks. The clear plastic magazine? Well, that's a cool idea, but it had a nasty habit of cracking under pressure, I mean literally. Imagine gearing up for combat only to find your ammo has been scattered across the ground. That's not exactly confidence-inspiring. Then there was a reliability or lack thereof. The Insas was notorious for jamming at the worst possible moments, leaving soldiers to clear malfunctions instead of firing back. The burst fire mode, well, let's just call it temperamental. Sometimes it worked great, and other times it had a mind of its own. Despite its flaws, the Insas was not a total flop. It was rugged, affordable, and relatively easy to produce, making it a practical choice for India's massive military. Shoot, it even held its own during the Kargil War, enduring harsh mountain conditions and helping Indian forces secure a victory. But as technology advanced, the Insas fell behind, eventually being replaced by more reliable rifles like the AK-203 in the 2010s. The Insas might not top anyone's list of favorite rifles, but it holds an important piece in the history of India's military. It's a reminder of the challenges and triumphs of building a defense system from the ground up. And for that, it deserves my nod of respect. Well, that's all for now, folks. What should I cover next? Drop your ideas in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that little bell thingy so you're always in the loop. Before you go, click that next video to your right, because you're not going to want to miss it. Till next time, keep your powder dry and your mind sharp. We'll see you soon.